Welcome to this Board of I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Can you do the roll call, please?
Yes, I can. Commissioner Greeno?
Here.
Commissioner Inscore?
Here.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Chair Cowan?
Here. Mr. Howard, could you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So at this time, we will take public comments. Any member of the public may address the Solid Waste Management Authority on any matter on or off the agenda. Do we have any public comment at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda.
The consent agenda today consists of the minutes, 2 claims which are over $5,000, and so that's above the limit that I can approve, though they are all budgeted expenses and within the budget. And then we also have a budget transfer in the amount of $3,000, taking the extra interest that we've received to date and splitting that between hazardous waste and overtime lines. We're using more overtime because we had not yet hired somebody who we just went through interview processes on, and we're adding money to the household hazardous waste line, in part because we use this line to do sharps collections, and also we had an additional expense of managing some outdated hand sanitizer for the County Office of Emergency Services. We anticipate getting reimbursed for that, but until that happens, that's part of the reason why we need to add money to that budget line.
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second.
Commissioner Greeno?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Inscore?
Yes.
Chair Cowan?
Yes, I did not take public comment on the consent agenda, so I'm going to at this time. Is there any public comment on the consent agenda? Okay, thanks. Sorry, I just wanted to get that out. Okay. So we'll move on to the treasurer's report. We have agenda items 2.1 through 2.5 and are provided for information only. Do you want to talk about that, Ted?
Yeah, I would. Thank you, Chair Cowan. Starting with the director's report, we continue to be open every day that we are posted, and we provide the services at the Delaware County Transfer Station, the Klamath Transfer Station, and the Gasky Transfer Station without receiving a penny in taxes, and our rates are the lowest for similar facilities in Humboldt or Curry counties. On the agenda today, we have the post-closure item that I guess I'll cover those other items as we come along, so I'll highlight some of the things that are not otherwise covered in the agenda. At the last meeting, we did receive a request from Hambro WSG for additional rate adjustments associated with brush. Those negotiations continue, but we do anticipate that the change orders will include some adjustments to the brush rates. At the last meeting, I was asked to specifically highlight what were our procedures when a charged customer is placed on hold, and you wanted, my understanding was that you all wanted reassurance that a phone call was made before anyone is placed on hold, and I've confirmed that's the case. So before any account is placed on hold, we always give them at least one phone call trying to contact the person whose name we have as contact for that account. I did attend the Environmental Services Joint Powers Authority meeting in Sacramento for the Regional Council of Rural Counties. I've been appointed as an alternate for the county, and we do pay the dues for that entity on behalf of the county. That partnership so far continues to bear fruit. Most recently, we're talking with other Northern California counties, including Siskiyou, Trinity, Shasta, Modoc, and Glenn counties, and possibly partnering with them to produce a newspaper insert, a more comprehensive information piece about recycling and reducing contamination in the waste stream. So we're working on that together. And also coming out of that, we did have, we were initially approached by a school outreach program called Eco Hero. And those, we currently have 2 scheduled outreach events, one on May 9th at Gasky Mountain School, another one on May 10th in Redwood Elementary. So we will continue to work with Eco Hero to promote recycling in the schools. We've also updated our scale management software, so we're now on a new version of that, and all new staff have been trained on that, so that's all operational. We certainly thank Andrew Butcher of Digital Needs Services for helping us with that installation. We interviewed applicants for refuse site attendant positions this morning. So we had 7 applicants that we interviewed, and we do plan on hiring in the coming week. And then attached to the director's report, we also have the letter requesting information from the union representative, Patrick Hickey, just to let you know that those negotiations are continuing. And then we also have a handout. If Kira, have you handed that out yet? There is a handout probably in front of your desks of a narrative proposal for a grant application. This grant application has been prepared by the staff of the California Product Stewardship Council, and I'm treasurer for that organization. But this is a competitive grant, and the Product Stewardship Council has included us in a larger grant for several communities. But this grant would specifically promote the Refuel Your Fund program that Kira Seymour started. So we have 3 locations currently that are offering refillable small propane containers, and we'd be looking to promote that and expand that and possibly have a few exchange events. And we'll also be using these resources to promote alternatives to the marine flares that are used as flare gun sort of situations. We're looking at trying to encourage the use of LEDs and smoke items, because those are not hazardous when disposed, and all of the projectile flares are very difficult and expensive to manage correctly when they've expired. So at this point in time, this is just for information. The board will be asked to adopt a resolution supporting this application at the next meeting, but because this application wasn't ready at the time that the agenda was printed, there's no action called for today. It's just an information item.
Thank you.
So that concludes the director's report. If there are no questions, I'd be happy to move on to the other reports.
Any questions, gentlemen?
Yeah, Ted, I noticed that we're going to get into some of this discussion, and I 100% agree with you that this your alternate position on the RC CSAC type stuff is going to pay dividends for us going into the future, especially on this AB 1080. I know we have it on the agenda to discuss today along with Senate Bill 54. Yep. We had a conference call with CSAC today on some of this. Definitely want to dive deeper on that agenda item. Brief us on the organics.
Where are we at with organics? Yeah. The short summary is that in general, CalRecycle is significantly increasing both the expectations and the requirements to recover organics and food scraps from urban communities. Thankfully, as a rural community, those requirements are not hitting us as hard as soon.
Yet.
At this point in time. Many of those planning requirements will still happen. So actually that is part of our rationale and motivation for this newspaper insert, because we recognize, for instance, food waste collection is not very practical for a rural community. The investment that's necessary to make that happen, the infrastructure that's necessary to handle those materials properly is, on a cost per ton basis, is pretty daunting, even for a larger community. But for a rural community, it really becomes kind of difficult to imagine. But that doesn't mean that there's nothing that we can do, for instance. So with regards to food scraps, which are something that if they're disposed of in a landfill, there's methane, so that's a more potent greenhouse gas. So in general, it's best if we can keep the food scraps out of the landfill. If you can keep them out of the recycling, that's good too, because that is a contaminant for the recycling. But there are options that we currently have. We have outreach for backyard composting, and we regularly have workshops on that. And we can do outreach to help people learn how to better use their food scraps. Everything from making stews and soups to how you store materials and how you bring containers when you're going out to lunch, and are you ready to store your leftovers? That kind of thing. So we can offer advice in ways that reduce food waste. that don't necessarily involve a new collection program. So that's part of the things that we're looking to do to try to address some of these
Sure.
requirements.
I guess my fear, especially after today's phone call with the Natural Resources Committee with CSAC, and as quoted by Kara Seymour, a lot of what she sees coming down, especially through some of the proposed legislation, seems absolutely draconian. And the level of sorting that will fall on the shoulders of the individual households is it's way out of touch with reality. I guess what I want to ensure, whether it's the county paying attention to this or whether it's our JPA, is that you in particular, being our point of contact within, as our alternate down there in Sacramento, if we could continue monitoring this closely and we could react to it appropriately with letters to the state legislature when some of these bills start hitting committee. I would not want to see this come before the full assembly.
Right.
For a vote.
At this point in time, a lot of those requirements have already been in laws that have been adopted, but the regulations are really where the rubber is hitting the road currently. So engaging on the comments on those regulations is the best we can do.
Yep. No, I get it, and I want to make sure we're engaging.
Thank you for
In
that
a
support.
timely fashion. Sorry, Madam Chair.
Okay. Oh, useful discussion, because
Yes,
you're absolutely right. CSAC and the ESJPA is one of the primary tools that we have to understand the status of legislation, where it's likely to go, who are the players, because as an individual rural county, our voice is pretty small.
Yep.
As part of a larger group of nearly over 20 rural counties, it's much more significant. And to the extent that we can be engaged in those discussions, it's definitely beneficial to our community.
Around 32 involved with RCRC.
Okay, I thought it was 31, so,
Well, I appreciate the numbers are going
Oh,
up.
okay.
That's great.
no, that's good. So, great. Thank you on that. We'll move on to landfill post-closure
Well,
status
let me, if I
report.
could do a quick brush over on the financial reports.
Sure.
Okay. So in general, our
125.
February tends to be pretty much our slowest month, and that was true this year as well. Our major expenses in terms of claims paid by director, of course, our main payment is to Hambro WSG for the good services they provide at the transfer station. And this month, you'll also notice we have a couple thousand for paying for that expired hand sanitizer disposal, and we're hoping that that'll be reimbursed through an interdepartmental transfer in the coming months. Regarding our finances, like I said, February is the slowest month, so on our authority service fees, at this point, we are behind budget on authority service fees by $15,000, and on franchise fees, unusually, we're ahead by $25,000, so the net result is that our income is currently ahead of budget by a little over $10,000. And that concludes our financial reports.
Okay. Claims approved by Director and Treasury, those are just informational, right?
Yep.
Money, monthly cash charge, we all have that. Earned revenue, we've gone over that. So we can move on to item 3.3 or 3.1 now?
3.1, yes, thank you. So this is approval. I've been given standing direction by the board that each year we apply for a reduction in our post-closure multiplier. I can drag you through what that means again, but in general, we are approved. It's good for our financial statements. I assume you all want a brief meeting, so that's the brief report.
No, we want to stay here for a while. We've got
No.
at least until 6.
No, actually, we don't.
Do we want to go back over this 3.1 one more time?
Thank you.
We haven't even figured out
Thank you,
Okay,
Director
moving
Wharton.
on to
No action
item
is required.
4.1, the status report regarding March 17th open house.
This is also going to be a quick item. This
Okay.
is open
Anybody
house.
get down there? Was this the one down at the facility at Samoa that we were at?
The very same, right.
Okay.
And you'd seen it when it first opened.
Yeah.
And now this was the open house because they had opened with all the bells and whistles, and now they were satisfied.
Were any of the commissioners able to go down and see the facility? It's quite impressive, no? darn.
Kira and I went down, and a good
That's all
time
that
was had by
matters.
all. I'm not advancing, so I guess I'm going to have to ask. Got to turn the bloody thing on. Okay. So some of these are reviews.
Cowan
Essentially, Commissioners Cowan and Naffa have already been there. Oops, still not working. Thank you.
I saw, that's what I just said, Commissioner
There you go.
Cowan and Naffa.
Okay. So in general, this is where all of the recyclables from Humboldt and Del Norte County are processed. The recyclables are unloaded and stockpiled. The stockpile of mixed recyclable materials are loaded onto conveyors. And the facility was originally built to process containers and papers as separate recycling streams, but those streams have now been combined. Sorting and conveyors separate the containers from the papers. Sorting areas were enclosed. I'm pretty sure when we viewed them last, they had removed those enclosures. So that was part of the retrofit. They've invested multiple millions of dollars to retrofit the equipment to improve the sorting so that they can continue to market the materials. We've been talking in the over the last few years about the marketing crisis, particularly in China, but in general, the contamination levels that are acceptable for materials marketed has gone down quite a bit. And so they need to focus their efforts to try to remove ever more contaminants. And that's, of course, a partnership. We try to keep the materials that we send to our recycling as clean as possible, and then they have to clean them up further before they can be marketed. So essentially, this is how it all works. On the left end, you see the materials are loaded onto the conveyors. They go through the sorting lines, and then it moves on towards the balers here. These bottom areas are where the materials are sorted. So both they have positive sorts here where you're separating out, say, the white paper that can be recycled, the cardboard that can be recycled, and you also have sorting for contaminants. So this is a good example of some of the metals that are regularly put into the recycling bins that are not recyclable. In the middle you see the variety of plastic items and hoses, and really people making the mistake of saying, well, gosh, it's plastic, so it must be recyclable. That's not true. So just to be really clear, we still recycle plastics that are containers, jars, jugs, and tubs. All plastic jars, jugs, and tubs. But if it's not a jar, jug, or tub, it can't have the number 3 or the number 6. So these hard plastic items, auto parts, those sorts of things are not recyclable. These large plastic tubs are not. Also film plastics and plastic bags, bubble wrap, that sort of stuff is not recyclable. But you can see also you've got plush toys and things like that. So the general idea of, gosh, somebody should be able to use this, so I'll just put this in the recycling bin, that too is not a good impulse. In general, if you're not sure it's part of the recycling program, lift the lid of your recycling bin, look at the list of what's recyclable, and if it's not in there, it goes in the trash. So the materials are brought up onto the baler. It's a side stroke baler, so the materials are loaded on top, and then a ram comes in from either side and jams that together, and then you've got these bales. Bales are stockpiled prior to shipping. And the facility has also undergone an education room, which I guess is called the large conference room, but you might not be able to read that. But this is a cabinet that's labeled "This Instead," offering different ways to either reuse materials that you might otherwise throw away, or make materials that can otherwise reduce waste. So Linda Wise, the manager of the processing facility there, was showing how to make dishwasher tablets using old ice cube trays and borax and some other materials. There's a recipe there. If folks are interested, we can probably get that for them. And then the other thing they were doing is they were making reusable beeswax wraps, so those can be used instead of saran wraps. So that was just cloth you dip into a combination of beeswax and I think it was pine tar, maybe, something to make it sticky, and then you dip it in there and dry it out, and within a few minutes you have this wrap that's reusable and can replace, boxes and boxes of saran wrap. So it was a good tour, and we appreciate that they're now processing our materials. Any questions?
Any comments, gentlemen? No? Thank you, Ted.
Okay.
Transfer station 5.1 status report.
We are continuing on with our 3 events per year for Mattress Recycling. So our next one will be Saturday, May 4th, between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. Del Norte County residents can bring up to 4 mattresses or box springs for no charge. If you have larger quantities of mattresses, say you run a hotel or a mobile home park and you want to do a big mattress swap out, please call in advance. We can make arrangements, but don't show up with 20 mattresses expecting them all to be for free, because that's not going to happen. Got any questions? Of course, you can give us a call. And a couple other things, as long as we're talking about mattresses. First of all, if you are ordering a mattress and somebody is delivering a mattress to your house, you can ask them to take away your old mattress and box spring for no charge. That's part of this program. The other thing that can happen is Recology is now participating in this program, and if you have been a Recology customer for over 90 days, you can ask for them to collect up to 2 bulky items for no additional charge from your house. So that could be a mattress and box spring. And Recology now has a trailer where they're loading their mattresses and box springs, and those are also part of the Mattress Recycling program. And then finally, Humboldt Moving and Storage continues to recycle mattresses on Wednesdays from 9 a.m. until 1 p.m. and you can bring up to 6 mattresses or box springs on those days. And my understanding is they will very shortly be doing that also on Saturdays. So soon it will be Wednesdays and Saturdays. So we're continuing on with our mattress recycling program, and as long as we're talking about it, I'll also mention that I do continue to advocate through the ESJPA and others that in general we are not satisfied with this program yet, because everybody who buys a mattress still has to pay the $10.50 every time they buy a mattress in Del Norte County, and yet that service is not available daily for free mattress recycling, and we feel like that's not fair. So we'll continue to voice that opinion. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any question?
No.
No? Okay, moving on to other general solid waste authority matters. Discussion and possible action regarding resolution number 2019-03 of the Board of Commissioners of the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority modifying regular meeting date and time. So this is something we spoke about, what was it, last meeting?
At the last meeting, at the end of the meeting, Mr. Naffa, Commissioner Naffa, had expressed that he had requested that the regular meeting time be changed to Thursday. Part of the discussion that I recall at that point was tri-agency meets here at 3 o'clock, and so there was some concern about being able to regularly start our meeting on time. And then there was the follow-on discussion as the meeting was starting, recognizing that Mr. Naffa has been hired as the city manager for Trinidad, and so that was part of the basis of his request. As I spoke to him this afternoon, he did say that he felt on most occasions he would be able to make a Thursday meeting. And if the board absolutely couldn't do it, he probably would be willing to come back into town. But that's about as much as I know. And again, for their further discussions about what actually works for Mr. Naffa, I'd really feel most comfortable if he was here.
Yeah, me too. We're moving things around to help somebody, and not that I don't want to, but now we don't even know if he will be able to be here. So, and it's going up against tri-agency, and it sounds like you guys are okay with that, correct? Blake and Chris?
I cannot do a 4 o'clock on the 3rd Thursday. I have another meeting that started 24 minutes ago. So I was not processing it last month that we were talking about every month on the 3rd Thursday. I know we talked about we're already here for tri-agency, but it wasn't in my mind.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking this is the 3rd Thursday. I was just thinking we're already here. 3 of us are already here, but what day of the month that actually is. So the 3rd Thursday absolutely does not work for me.
Doesn't work for me either.
Okay. So does the regular meeting that we always had on Tuesdays, I mean, going back to where we were, 4 o'clock on, was that the 3rd? No, that was on the 3rd Thursday?
4 o'clock on the 3rd Tuesday is currently our regular meeting.
Yeah, okay, that worked for me. I was feeling guilty because I had to shuffle things around for myself and made arrangements to be here and change agenda review. So I'm okay with a Tuesday, the 3rd Tuesday at 4 p.m.
Shall I schedule the next meeting that
Mr. Howard?
I'm sorry.
Well, how do you feel? I've heard from these two. How do you feel about just keeping it the third Tuesday at 4 p.m.?
It worked for me.
Yeah. What would you suggest?
That perhaps our April meeting be the third Tuesday of the month, and that we agendize another item to discuss this, and hopefully Mr. Naffa will be able to make that meeting, and then everybody can talk it through.
I don't believe Chair Howard and I will be able to, though.
The third Tuesday doesn't work?
No, it does. Third Tuesday, 1, 2, 3.
16th.
16th works, yeah, sorry. I lied.
Okay,
Yes. We're here.
16th.
16th
Okay,
works.
so we're on for the 16th. That's Tuesday, I'm sorry, I don't.
Well, I guess my
We're sure it's the 16th, not the 17th?
I will not make the 16th, though.
I was thinking. Okay. So then we're down 2, because I'm assuming Mr. Naffa cannot attend Tuesdays.
And then that's only because there just happens to be a meeting I need to be at next day in Los Angeles. I need to take that flight out early.
But normally it works.
Normally it works.
Yeah, and I was thinking that conflicted with Ledge Days, but that's the following week.
That's the following week.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was, I thought the legislative was that week too. That's what I
You
was
thought it
saying.
was for you. That's right, the
I thought
week
they- but
before us.
They're
It's not.
back-to-back days, they're not back-to-back weeks.
Okay, so
So
you're.
yours is like on the 24th and ours
Yes.
is like on the 23rd.
Oh.
So they're
We're the
back-to-back
same
days,
week. Okay,
same week.
gotcha, nothing different. Okay, so we're
My
all stacked together.
recommendation is, and you can do what you want, my recommendation is we just leave the meeting where it is. And I'm sorry that Mr. Naffa, his schedule may not allow for that, but I think that moving it around is part of what has created some of all of this. If one of us has to miss a meeting, then we have to miss a meeting. But to me, it worked a lot better until we started making all these moves for one person. You know, I've got to be at a meeting, so let's move our meeting. Or, you know, it's like Chris has got to be gone, so now we move the meeting. And
Yeah, I don't need to be here if you guys have a quorum.
as long as we have a quorum.
Yeah,
just-
and it works
that-
for me, and Tuesdays work for me, and I'm kind of the same mind that we just keep it how it is and see how that works. How do you feel?
I agree with that as well.
Okay.
Tuesdays have always worked.
So is this a decision? Do you want an agenda item to discuss meeting date and time on the next agenda, or no?
Not if we're going to
I
keep it
don't
the
need
same.
it, but I mean, obviously, if Mr. Naffa wants it to be discussed and him to be here, then I don't have a problem with you putting it back on the agenda.
Oh, I see.
don't,
Okay.
since he's not here, and he was the one that made the request, and,
Okay.
so, yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with putting it back on, but
I'll put it as a general item. I won't have a resolution drafted.
there you go.
Perfect. Pretty good with that?
Yeah. I'm good with that.
Okay, item 6.2, discussion and possible action regarding nominees for the 2019 Green Ribbon Awards.
This is the only environmental award given by any local government agency in the county, and we generally like to recognize efforts above and beyond, and efforts by folks in the community who either make recycling work or keep the community clean, but essentially recognizing extra efforts by individuals who do things that help the community. So our recommendations this year include the following, and this is introduced as an idea, so if the board has any different opinions or thinks that other folks should be added to this list, this is the time to do that. We recommend perhaps considering awards for outstanding business leadership in reuse to the Hyuchi Hamlet, Suburban Propane, and Lucky 7 Fuel Mart for being part of the Refuel Your Fund program. And we really appreciate them stepping up to do that, offering refillable and refilling small propane containers. And as a tourist-oriented community, it's delightful that we are the nearest place north of Santa Rosa that currently offers that program. So that we're very happy about. And then we also have outstanding business leadership in recycling for all the retailers who are participating in our all-household battery take-back program. We discussed that a little bit in last meeting, but they currently include Crescent Ace Hardware, Home Depot, Walgreens, Safeway, US Cellular, the Fort Dick Market, the Hyuchi Hamlet, the Gasky Market, the Peme Fuel Mart, and the Yurok Tribal Office. So all of those are great partners in our ongoing battery recycling program, and we'd like to recognize their efforts. And then we also have, we also generally try to give awards for folks who are processing most of the materials. So in this case, that includes Hambro WSG and their buyback recycling operation. And then once again, even though this is the second year in a row, we really like to recognize outstanding folks who are promoting recycling in their apartment complexes. And so once again, Richard Knutson of West Park Properties is being recommended for recognition for his outreach to his apartment complexes.
Excellent. Is there anybody you guys think we should add, commissioners?
I should also suggest that Ms. Cowan and I did discuss considering Janet Gilbert for her promotion of Tansy Games, but I didn't put her on the list at this point because the Tansy Games haven't happened yet. So I figured.
Yeah, next year. Anything else? Well, good. We'll go forward with that.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll consider that consensus direction.
Moving on, 6.3, discussion and possible support for AB 1080 Gonzalez and SB 54 Allen, California Circular Economy and Plastic Pollution Reduction Act.
In general, in the legislature at this point in time, there's a lot of concern about plastics. A lot of concerns about plastics in the ocean, plastics as contaminants for our recycling programs, plastics as litter, plastics as persistent eyesores in our communities. And so there has been considerable discussion already in the legislature, and the two main bills that are working in parallel. One's working in the Senate, another one's working in the House. You may all be familiar that typically a bill starts in one house or the other and then goes to committee. But to try to speed along that process, both of these are moving in parallel so that these discussions can happen and the bills can have a chance of passing. Essentially, these bills do three things. They look at single-use packaging, and products sold and distributed in California must be reduced, recycled, or composted by 75% by 2030. That all single-use packaging and products must be recyclable or compostable on and after 2030. And as part of a shift to a more circular economy, bill instructs CalRecycle to develop incentives and policies to encourage in-state manufacturing using recycled material generated in California. So those are the three general provisions, and these are already moving, but these are going to be the primary plastics bills. And so if the board is concerned about contaminants in recycling and the general problems with plastics, staff recommend supporting these bills and sending letters of support as they move through the different committees.
I want to explore this a little with you. So, single-use plastics. Define, and I'm having trouble finding it in the legislation right now, they define a single-use plastic, but defined recyclable and compostable.
Yeah.
Single use. I don't see the recyclable piece in the definitions in the legislation. That probably should be addressed. I mean, and I'm referring to specifically a plastic that has a monetary value. Do you know what it is at this point? I haven't explored it any further.
The short of it is no. As you may be aware, plastics generally are graded by codes, and so you have plastic resin types 1 through 7. Typically, the markets for plastics number 1 and 2 are very strong, and there's a reasonably strong market for plastic number 5. Other than that, the plastics markets are best described as struggling to non-existent. And so that's part of the discussion. So at this point in time, I'm comfortable saying plastics 1, 2, and 5 are very recyclable, and the other ones maybe less so.
So I guess the next logical question is, how does that impact those current recyclables 1, 2, and 5 that are very recyclable? How does the legislation affect those plastics?
I think if this legislation were to pass as it currently stands, I think you'd probably see a number of plastic materials moving from those other plastic resins to the more recyclable plastic resins, to the extent that that's possible. To the extent that that's not possible, then I would anticipate those other kind of resins, looking at either scrambling to convince folks that they're actually recyclable and that there's infrastructure that's being developed, or you're looking at phasing them out. I think that's pretty much where it stands. Because part of the motivation for this in general is that there's a statewide recycling mandate. We're trying to get to 75% recycling. Having single-use plastic items that have no prospect of recycling are not playing the game. They're not on the same game board as all of the other materials in California. So that's kind of not fair. And there's pollution issues associated with these materials. So they're trying to address all of those things at the same time.
Yeah, and I guess the obvious questions for me as this arises is that there's a lot of products in the state of California that are made with plastics that are just not the kind of plastics we initially think of, whether it's a container for a beverage or a food item. We're talking plastics like the hose reel I saw in a picture earlier. We're talking babies, car seats. I mean, the extent at which this legislation could release hell on earth, in my opinion, by 2030 in changing the market here in the state of California is incredible. And I'm wondering how much this legislation actually contemplates that. The market catching up and finding an alternative product, resin-based, recyclable resin-based product. How much is that technology caught up with actually what the state of California would like to do? Obviously, right now, our state legislature is considering policy driving changes in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes that backfires on us, as we've seen with previous legislation.
Yeah, and I think if we were talking about non-recyclable plastics in general, I would share your concern. In reading the committee report and trying to read with what Ted gave us, it appears that this is focusing, both the Assembly 1080 and SB 54 are focusing on single-use containers, not a car seat, not a baby toy, but a single-use container. In other words, this candy bar, whatever, comes in this plastic container. If that's not recyclable, then it's got to go into something that does. Or food, at a fast food place, if they're still using something that's plastic that's not, if I'm understanding correctly, that's talking about 75% reduction of all of those single-use pieces, not plastics in general.
Yes, it's a dynamic thing, so I feel like it's hard for me to summarize. But yes, I think they are targeting more the packaging materials than, say, the automotive plastics.
Yeah, and getting back to my original statement and the clarity I'm trying to seek here, because if you go to the legislation and look under the definition of single-use plastics, you see A, B, and C. You go down to C, a single resin type specific in section 18014. I don't know what that is, but what I do know is that that could broadly capture a lot of what I was just talking about. I believe. I think the legislature, or at least the sponsors of this legislation, should more clearly define that in here. I understand your point, Commissioner. Single-use plastics as defined in item 2A, that's pretty clear with that drinkable bottle. Yeah. But that's also a number 1, a number 2, and a number 5 plastic, as referred to by Director here just a few minutes ago. So my clarity, which I'm seeking, I don't think I fully understand the legislation. I need more information.
And are they taking into, I don't really see in here that they're taking into consideration a flood of all these new companies coming in and using the types of plastics that are currently profitable in the marketplace. So I mean, if everyone starts changing, how is that going to affect the current?
Well, I
mean, you're going to have this influx of all this new product. I mean, where's the price going to go? It's going to go down. You're going to have I mean, we've got this problem right now in the plastics market. We're flooded in California with all these plastics, and so the price is going down. It's not worth as much.
Well, part of this, I think it is important to understand where plastics come from, which is you have byproducts from the petroleum refining process, and those are chemically combined with natural gas, and that's largely how plastics are produced.
Yes.
And so when you're refining a barrel of oil, you're selling the fuel. That's mostly what you're interested in. The rest, you can manage as a waste. You can make into a product. Those are your choices, right? Given that choice, you got to pay for the waste. You make it into the product, you can sell it. Well, if there's no impediment to making more and more product, that's what has brought us to this point. And so we have a petroleum-driven economy, and for each barrel of fuel that's processed, some of that is made into plastics. And so those virgin plastics are going to be way cheaper to produce than the process of separating out the materials, trying to sort them from the recycling stream, separating them from the other materials, processing them, baling, pelletizing them, getting them to market. That process is much more expensive than the petroleum refining process. And so there's been this incongruity between the competitive nature of recycling versus resource extraction. And this is part of the fundamental problem. So if you talk to folks who are in the petroleum refining industry, they will tell you, look, when you're using plastics, you're already recycling, because those materials otherwise would have been disposed of as waste. And there's a certain truth to that. But the other side of it is we produce so much plastic that have been used in single use and dissipative and to-go kind of uses, that those have accumulated in our oceans and our environments, and there's no resources whatsoever to pick up all of those materials to remove those contaminants from the environment. And so if we don't start to try to create a system where those materials are captured, then we may end up where we're headed. So that's the crux of what this legislation is trying to deal with.
My issue with this is that it's trying to fundamentally change a system within a very short amount of time. And in the end, that's going to cost the people of California even more. Especially since this state has already shown that it's not competent when it comes to recycling. I mean, let's be honest, CalRecycle does a terrible job. And
I would, that begs further discussion, sir.
Okay, well, we have differences of opinion then. Especially when California restricts what you can do to get rid of these products by you know, they don't allow local communities the freedom to innovate and get rid of these the plastics or cardboard or whatever in a way that might be more cost effective. So it just bothers me that we're in essence trashing the old system and creating a new system in a very short amount of time when we haven't really been given the freedom to work within the system that we have. Does it effectively?
That doesn't make sense to me. The bottom line is if you have plastics that are not recyclable, there's nothing to work. And my opinion is put that back on the manufacturer instead of putting it onto the consumer. If a manufacturer is going to put a product into the hands of people that's going to create this dynamic, then they should take responsibility for the product that they're putting out. But right now, they don't have to worry about that. They can, as Mr. Ward pointed out, they're taking this that would be waste to them, and they're generating a product that they turn and sell and make money off of, but they don't take any responsibility for the management of that product once it's been used that one time. So when that's what concerns me. And this is, and again, I haven't read all of 1080, but I've looked at SB 54 pretty well. This is focused in on those single-use plastics, and the bottom line is that's a huge part of this. It's every Keurig cup that gets used, and thrown away. It's every container of lunch meat. It's all these things that they produce very, very cheaply and make money off of, that come into this waste stream that we cannot recycle. And so we're just have a glut of these things. And if their manufacturer's not mandated that they have to change their behavior, then what is our option? Just throw it away? Just continue to fill it in the landfills?
No, but
That's my take on it.
I could see the point that Commissioner Greenhouse making. I see your point. The language currently in SB 1080 addresses the manufacturer. Obviously, the pressure is being put back on the manufacturer to change their ways and help change, as this legislation discusses, the societal issues around plastics use. I don't know how much the author of the legislation has contemplated what that means in our economy. And that gets back to the point that I think Commissioner Greenhouse is saying. We've got a decade, essentially, by 2030, to implement, hopefully, a new technology that's going to be compatible and not raise the marketplace challenges that we currently have with single-use plastics. I'm going to take, for example, Alexander Dairy that just spent $300,000 on molds in Japan that we're using on a brand new product line of milks, and we've got 7 different SKUs out there that utilize a number 2 plastic that would fall into this category. We've just made a substantial investment. I'm going to have to then now rely on a manufacturer to come up with something that is compostable based on 2080 language, and I'm going to assume that's correct. And Director Ward, please correct me if I'm wrong, because that's the clarity I need. I think I'm seeing that single-use material now needs to become compostable.
If you're looking at number 2 plastic, I would think you would go the recycling route rather than the compostable route.
Okay, so it's an either or. Right?
Well, it is an either or, but I have a lot of, I have to say the compostable plastic route, I don't know how really viable that is.
That's the technology piece that I'm...
And I don't know that it's really viable. And the basics of it are this. Most compostable plastics are made by combining a bit of some kind of plant starch,
right,
either a potato or a corn starch, with regular plastic polymers and monomers.
Yeah.
And so when it breaks down into little pieces of plastic, which is not composting, it's the production of microplastics.
So a recyclable plastic, the 1, 2s, and 5s,
Yes.
Which we currently are, does the legislation address a monetary impact? So those number 2s we currently do not pay for at this time, right? There's no charge at the cash register to recycle those, except for on number 1s?
I believe there's only a deposit on distilled water bottles for
That's
the number 2 plastic.
The number 2.
The number 2 plastic that usually is used for milk jugs is not generally part of the beverage container program, except for in, I think, jugs of juice, I think jugs of distilled water. There's a few specific categories where it's in, but mostly it's not part of the CRV
Yeah,
system. But its scrap value tends to be pretty strong, though that's declined as well.
Yeah, the market, there's no question in my mind. Alexander Dairy is not going to be the only one. We're obviously a user of this for a product. We're substantially invested in it. It's going to be 5 years before we even break even in the utilization of this, and now we're going to be wrestling with potentially going back out and finding something else to deal with. And then I look at a business that uses food containers.
Which we've taken the choice to change, but we went from styrofoam to a recyclable. Same with straws. We
And
went
what
from
was the
plastic
increase
to
in cost?
It was a significant
10
increase.
to 15
50
cents per...
50 cents
50
on
cents
some of
per...
them per container.
Right.
And then it's, do you pass it on to the consumer, or do I just hold it?
You have to.
So, right. So, yeah.
So we're obviously getting...
We've definitely taken the hit on that already.
So just trying to work with the discussion of the board. I'm not really hearing a consensus that you all want to support this legislation at this point in time. but I'd be happy to continue
Where are
this
we-
as a discussion.
Where are
item.
we at? I haven't paid close enough attention.
It's moving
Where-
through committees. It just passed unanimously out of, was it
Yeah.
the Senate Environmental Committee?
Yes.
And so it's moving through the committees, and it seems to have
I was in
broad-based
committee
support.
yesterday.
In general, if the bill is moving with support, the board's voice is most effective in a support, but a support with amendments, essentially engaging one way or the other in the direction it's headed. But if you just care to continue to discuss this, and I'll keep you updated with
Yeah.
where it's at, I'd be happy to do that.
And I guess the point I'm trying to make is for businesses that rely currently on these type of products, they're going to need more time than 10 years in order to transition, especially if my viable window is looking at 5 years just to get to a break-even point of the product that is utilized in these containers. So, I mean, obviously the societal piece of this, which is driving the legislation, which is the plastics in the ocean and everywhere else, which we, according to this data, are 25% of the world's problem. We need time. That's the bottom line, new time, and 2030 is coming pretty quick. I would be completely supportive of this kind of legislation if we had more time, and I would like further specification on the definition on what a single resin type specified in 18101 or 5 would be.
And Mr. Ward, maybe you can answer this. So if the milk containers that are used now are number 2s, that's recyclable. So you're already in compliance. You're at 100% compliance right now. According to the legislation, that by 2022, you have to be at 20% of single use. It's either got to either be recyclable or compostable.
Compostable.
By
These are-
2026, you got to be at 40%.
So here's my problem. Those plastics currently aren't, they're recyclable, but they're being held in the Port of Oakland because there's no market to send those recyclables to. Right? 1, 2s, and
Yeah, I don't-
5s?
What do you
So,
mean by that? Why are they being held?
We're bottlenecked right now.
So what, that doesn't seem
Wait,
like.
so
It's not
is
just
your-
bottleneck on the 1, 2s, and 5s. The bottleneck is actually primarily on the 3 through 7s, but, and it's the mixed plastics. But that doesn't mean that they're not still stacked up in the ports. What you say is correct.
Okay, so I guess that's my concern is this doesn't necessarily solve a problem other than create further market limitations.
Well, it does solve a problem in that it
Environmental problem.
it takes more of those out of the waste stream, or
Yeah, you're basically forcing through policy and legislation a change in the market.
it's using the same premise that we did with the banning plastic bags. It's the idea of removing that from the stream. Again, and I guess I would look at it from the standpoint, from a business standpoint, if there is concern that we're currently a 2, and that someplace down the line, somebody's going to change that and change the definition of that, and now you have to come into the compliance with where everybody else is. But I guess I would look at it that you're already meeting this standard of what the legislation is written as.
Yeah, but those plastics are continuing to accumulate.
Yes.
They're not being recycled, which, because our forward market,
no,
China, which was taking these materials, aren't recycling them anymore.
Number 1s and 2s are being recycled.
Where?
Uh,
In the U.S.?
Yeah, Asia. I mean, it's not China or, that's happening.
Indonesia.
Now we've done other things to make them recyclable. And he's correct, the ones that we
Can you come up to the
Yeah.
mic and
Your
explain all
knowledge
that?
would be welcomed.
have very little.
It sounds like you have a lot.
Then Director Ward and you can help.
I think you can answer
inform
the
us.
question. I think the question is, where is the 1 and 2 and not
So
five
we've
right
been
now?
stuck, we have been stuck with the China sword, that's true, but, we're always looking for other places to take these recyclables, and they are going to other countries. Some of them are going to Asia, some of them are going to other places. It might not, China's is down to like, 0.5%.
Contamination.
Yeah, they don't
is
want it.
ridiculous.
But there are other countries that are a little bit more lenient, and so that's where those are going now.
And what are they doing with it?
that, I don't know what they're doing with it, so. I could find out and, I mean,
You are highlighting an issue that I have brought up in the discussions,
Yes, you
though,
have.
which is, unfortunately, the reality is, if you look at the information that's available, the same countries that are receiving our materials are also generally countries that don't manage these materials very well themselves. And so what we want to assure everybody is that if you put something in the recycling bin, not only we're going to do everything we can to make sure that that gets recycled, but we want to try to offer that assurance throughout. But the reality is, once it gets marketed,
We don't know what's going to
I
happen.
don't have the information anymore about what happens to it from that point, because it's brokered out, it can pass from hand to hand, and there's no reporting back about where it goes. So I have trouble assuring people that all of our materials are getting recycled and they're all getting managed correctly. I'd like to believe that, but the paper trail is thin.
I get the impression from this board that they need more information and
Yes.
want to sit on it.
Let's
Is that
just
the
sit,
consensus of
could we
the
bring
board?
this back at the next meeting?
Yes, we can.
And not
Okay.
to extend it, because I know Commissioner Enscore's got a bolt, but I would like to have some further discussion on this.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. Then we will adjourn until, well, we have this as Thursday, April 19th,
It would be Tuesday, April 16th.
and everybody's good with that. Okay, we'll see everybody on
Tuesday, April 16th at 4 p.m.
April 16th at 4 p.m. We're adjourned.
Thank you.